This is Pixelated Audio, and you're listening to another expansion pack.
Welcome to another Pixelated Audio expansion pack. We're your hosts, James and Brian.
How's it going?
And the track that you just heard was called Monster in My Pocket, Oriental Illusion.
Yeah, Monster in My Pocket. That's. I have a good. I have some memories with this game. I had a friend who had it. I didn't own it myself, but I had a friend who had it, so I remember it pretty well. But this track is really cool. Oriental Illusion. Wow, very Oriental sounding.
I can definitely see why they named it that. For me, I don't have any memories with this game. I didn't know that a game actually existed, but I do remember some of the other types of merchandise that came out for this whole thing. There was, there was a cartoon and clothing and toys and stuff like that, especially a lot of toys. I remember they had a whole bunch of those. But when I heard this track, I was like, what is this? And I was like, oh my God, I know Monsters in My Pocket, but I didn't know that there was an NES game. So
yeah, no. I played this. I had a friend who lived down the street, and we would kind of go over to each other's house, play different NES games. He had a bunch that I didn't have, like weird ones like this, and I had like a lot of mainstream ones that he didn't have, and so we would go back and forth and kind of play each other's games together. And I remember this game. I remember a lot. Like the gameplay was a lot like Ninja Turtles, like the original one, and you kind of run. It looks a lot like it too, but I don't remember much else about it. It is a platformer though, right?
Right, yeah, and when I looked up some playthrough videos on it, it was side scrolling, 2D, all that, and you're running around. You can choose between either vampire or like a Frankenstein looking monster in the beginning. And you're just running around, and you're really tiny. So, I mean, obviously the toys and everything really tiny. Monster in My Pocket, and the house is huge that you're running around in. So you're like up on the sink, and you're like on the floor, like running under chairs and stuff like that. So it was just really cool to see these little tiny characters running around this massive room, which was pretty neat.
Very, very cool. I thought this track too. Like it's funny because it's got this really almost like kind of cliche Oriental sound to it, but there's some really cool parts to this track that I thought were really cool, like how they did it. They had this syncopation like around like a minute in. In fact, let me see if I can play it here for a second, because I thought it was really cool, like how they did it. Let's see it. I think it's right here. Yeah, it's so weird. That's so weird. So I wanted to bring that up because I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's super fun, fast paced. I love that really fast paced up tempo beat, and just like the chimey sounds are just really cool. It's just a really the track really gets you excited to play and run around, and like I said, this game looks really fun. It came out in 1992 on the NES. It was developed and published by Konami. The composers for the game were Hiroshi, Takeyasu, and Kozo Nakamura.
Okay.
And Takeyasu had done things like Parodius for the NES.
Awesome.
Really cool. Tiny Toons Adventures 2 for the NES. Beatmania 6th Mix for the PSX. So that was really cool. And then Nakamura has done a ton of Turtle stuff. Pretty much anything you can think of Turtles. So I mean, even the look, like you had mentioned, has a Turtles feel. So we have like the Turtles for the arcade, Turtles 2 for the NES, Turtles 3, the Manhattan Project NES, Turtles in Time Arcade and SNES, and then even Hyperstone Heist on the Genesis. So, I mean, amazing list of music. Really great soundtrack. The whole soundtrack from beginning to end is really good, and it just looks like a really fun game.
Yeah, no, like I said, like I don't have a lot of memories with it. I do remember a few things about it, but it's so fuzzy. It wasn't a game that like stood out to me. So I didn't ever have like the desire as a kid. Even as a kid, I was like, I could pass this. I think I could pass on this. I don't have to pick it up for myself. So.
Right. I think for me, I would have been more one of those kids that's like, oh, I have some of these toys. I want this game. But
see, I didn't have like, any of the toys.
We didn't have a lot of, I didn't have a lot of NES games growing up. So I had, I think maybe like 5 or 6 different games that my dad picked up when he picked up the system. So I didn't really get a lot more. And I borrowed a few here and there. So I missed out on a lot of NES games. So this was a really cool find for me.
Very cool. Anyways, why don't we move over to the next track, which is a track that I picked out, and this is actually another NES. Well, this is actually a Famicom track, and the track is called Title Theme, and it's from a game called Formation Z.
Is that it?
That was it. What, were you expecting more?
Yeah.
That was it.
That's the whole track?
You're talking to the mic, dude.
Yeah, that's the whole track?
Hold on. I'll play for you again. Hold on.
Yeah, that's pretty short.
Yeah.
I liked it though. It had some cool stuff going on in the really short track.
No, I was like, all right, I'm gonna find something kind of small here and that we wouldn't normally play on any other show.
Right.
Because
that would be a bumper.
Yeah, that would be, we've had bumpers longer than that.
Yeah.
And it was like 8 seconds.
Yeah.
But no, it's the only track in the game.
Really? So it just loops continuously?
So we would never ever play this again, a track from this game again.
No, that's cool.
Yeah. It was, I mean, do you want to hear it again?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and play that.
So then it just loops continuously?
No. That's it.
So it's like a
there's no
like
music
the starting bias type thing, and then
no, that's the title screen. There's nothing else.
Nice.
No, so this came out. It's okay. So it's actually a pretty cool little game. There's not a whole lot to it. I don't have a composer for it. This is very, very early, and the Famicom was released in 1985 in Japan only. So this came out prior on the arcade in 84 and also on the MSX in 95. Or I'm sorry, 85. And then it was ported to the Virtual Console in 2009 in Japan. So I mean, the game was wanted. It was right. It did have a large enough following, and people enjoyed it enough that Nintendo was like, "Hey, look, we should put this out again." And it was released by Jaleco, and it was also published, or it was developed and published by Jaleco. So
nice.
Yeah, it's a cool little game though. It's a side-scrolling shooter. Reminds me of a lot of Moon Patrol. So the graphics look very Moon Patrol to me. But the player who you play as, you run on the ground, and then you can also transform into this plane and then back into like a mech. So it's like a mech that runs on the ground. So it's got this, kind of cool little side-scrolling shooter aspect to it. Like I said, there is no music in the game. It's just sound effects. So.
No, the style of games sounds really cool. I'm interested in that. And it was funny. I'm really glad that I didn't listen to your tracks before this, because
you probably would have been like, no, we're not playing that.
Right. No, I don't think I would have been like, no, but your reasoning behind it especially makes sense, that, there's no other music in the game. It's a cool little tune.
It's like this goofy little, like, you're never going to hear it again. And I mean, the composer, unknown. So we don't know who did it, but.
Yeah. And it was funny because when you were playing the track for me and I was listening, I wrote down, starts very simple. And then I was ready to like go on to like, like it really picks up, or like it's really dramatic or something. And you're like, no, that's it. That's the whole track. And I was like, are you kidding me? But no, I thought it was a really, really cool little tune, little itty bitty micro tune.
So when I picked this track, I was thinking to myself, I was like, James is gonna say something like, is that it? Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, what do you have next on the list, dude?
Next up, I have a track from a game that I've been trying to work into one of these expansion packs for a while. I have a track from Bonk 3, Bonk's
Awesome.
Big Adventure. The track is called Boss 2. You just heard Boss 2 from Bonk 3, Bonk's Big Adventure.
Yeah, that was awesome track. I like that. I like Bonk. All Bonk tracks are just really, really cool. It's got this really familiar kind of, I don't know, progression that I don't even know if it doesn't have anything especially Bonk sounding to me, but like I think the track does kind of convey like the gameplay of a Bonk game. I guess that works.
Yeah, no, I mean I love Bonk as well. It's a really cool series. It's simple and awesome. I just love the idea of running around in like a prehistoric world with a giant melon for a head. Like
and
headbutting things and
all
stuff.
the games, all the Bonk games on TurboGrafx were so freaking amazing. And I loved them all. Like I played them all. Like I remember doing when we were doing our Extra Life run once. Like I was just like I played Bonk pretty much for like 4 hours straight, like nonstop. Like
it's a great series. Like it's one of those things where had I not heard anything about Bonk before and just seeing Bonk, I'd have been like, I could probably pass on this. It looks like kind of like a generic game, but then it's just once you start playing it like any of the Bonk games, they're just so fun, and there's like you really get hooked in a lot. And this is a great PC Engine game.
Very cool.
I think for me, like the early '90s, there's just some really, really awesome music. The way I pick a lot of my tracks is I put the whole library kind of on random, and then when a track sticks out to me, I jot it down.
Right.
And I've had tons of Bonk tracks jotted down. I've been wanting to play some, and this one to me, I was like, all right, this one I'm ready to play this track.
It's funny.
It's just really fun.
It's funny because like I have a lot of experience. Like I know Bonk very, very well, but not this game that much. Like I don't have a lot of experience with Bonk 3. And out of all the other Bonk games I've played, like this is the one I had the least amount of experience with. Now I actually own the physical cue card for this, but I just haven't played all the way through it enough.
Right.
To like I've gotten into it, just not far enough into it. So.
Yeah, and like I said, this is a Boss track, so Boss 2. I really love like the synth sounds that are in it, and it's got this really awesome like bass beat behind the whole track. And you got some chirpy sounds and things like that, but that bass beat is just all the way through it. It's just really cool to me. I really like that.
I agree, and I think about what I like about this track too is that there's no slowdown as far as like, this is a platformer, so it's constant action moving. You're constantly moving in some direction. You're constantly trying to do something. And there's not like a lot of slowdown in the game. And I think what I like about this track is it keeps that energy level pretty high. And there's always something going on. You don't hear just like this random loop very, very early on. It feels like it lasts quite a bit longer before you hear any kind of like repeating.
Right. And that just is just really cool to see like a track that's long enough to, it's probably going to be a longer battle. And And looping tracks are not bad, but it's just I always really enjoyed when there was so much more to a track than just 10, 15 seconds. So before we move on, I want to mention the composers, which are Taro, Hara and Kunio Komatsu.
Okay.
They're both part of T's music.
Oh, excellent. Yeah,
we've mentioned them before,
right.
Which just to reiterate, they're a very large group of composers that have worked on a somewhat small number of video games. So we have games like Outrun for the Genesis, Bonk for Game Boy, NES.
They did the NES version of Bonk as well.
Yeah, they had that listed on their credits.
Okay.
Also, Felix the Cat. I threw that one in there because a lot of people know Felix the Cat. I've never played any of the games, but
it's really
I thought
weird.
It was really cool.
Yeah, a lot of people do know Felix the Cat, but I feel like nobody really knows.
Right. I don't remember watching a lot of Felix the Cat cartoons or anything. It's just like he became like an icon, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Like somehow, everybody knew who he was when I was a kid, and I don't know if anybody who actually was into the show.
Right. Well, and to hear that T's music did the music for those games, we might need to check into that.
We might need to investigate a little bit more. Yeah.
So what do you have next up?
So next up on my list, I actually have a game that I've been wanting to do a full episode on, and I know you have too. We've actually talked about this probably a long time ago, but it kind of either slipped the cracks or whatever. But it's a game called Warlocked for Game Boy.
Right.
Yeah. So this game, you didn't know that I had this pick, but this is a track that it's not my favorite track out of the whole soundtrack, but I think it's a very, very cool track, and I want to throw in here. This is actually background music 9 from the game, and there are no track names. This is just, whatever they had lined up next.
Right.
So let's go ahead and fire that up. That was background music 9 from Warlocked on the Game Boy. Actually, the Game Boy Color, composed by Jeroen Tel.
Nice. It's a very subtle track, I think. It starts out very simple, and it doesn't really progress very quickly. But to me, there's a part in the song where it seems like it's about to loop, and it switches to, well, not really switches, but it kind of gets a little bit more complex. And I feel like the transition to that was so subtle that it's almost like it's slowly building throughout the whole song.
It's a very kind of skippy track in in the sense that I feel like when I hear it, it's almost like a child's a nursery rhyme kind of like somebody walking, bobbing up and down, walking through a cave. I don't I get this weird vibe from that, but I think this track is really cool. It's super chill. It almost has this, I want to say, kind of reggae-ish kind of feel to it, but not really.
I can see a little bit of that. Yeah. To me, it just seems like a really good example of background music. I would assume, I've never played this game, but I would assume that this track is probably something you're going to hear quite a bit of. Maybe it's while you're doing a long level or things like that. So I could see it looping very well throughout the game and not really drawing your attention to, I just heard a loop. But it's just really fun. I don't know, it makes me want to look into the game, and just the soundtrack in general is just
it's so good,
amazing.
It's so good. It's one of those things that I never played as like when it came out. This actually was released in 2000 in North America only. It never came out in Japan, never came out in Europe either, I believe. And what's really interesting too is, well, I'll get into a little bit more about the gameplay, but let me talk first about the composer, because I think we've done a few things from Jeroen Tel on our show, but I don't think we've
he's been mentioned. But.
Right. I don't think we've gotten too much into him. He's a Dutch composer, and he's really, really well known for stuff in the demo scene. And a lot of his really, really good stuff that you might know would be, or from the Commodore 64 at least, would be like Combat Crazy, Cybernoid, RoboCop 3, which me and you loved the soundtrack for that, and Hawkeye and Eliminator. He's actually co-founder of a group called Maniacs of Noise, and they still do music today. They do a lot of stuff, not only game audio, but I think it's predominantly game audio, but they do a lot of different other sound effects and stuff like that as well. But Jeroen Tel, he's a really awesome composer, and he's probably one of my favorites of all time, because he just has this really cool demo scene, and I love that sound so much. In fact, when we were talking to Barry Leach on an episode, I think that was 16 or something.
Yeah, it was 15? The Utopia episode.
Utopia, yeah. And he mentioned Jeroen Tel like a lot. I don't know if we had that during like the Q&A with him, but we were talking to him later on, and he was just like, oh yeah, I did some stuff with Jeroen Tel. And I think that Jeroen Tel, Barry Leach, Jonathan Dunn have a very, very similar sound that they've brought from that demo scene kind of era to like newer systems, not only the Commodore, but like NES and Super NES. This game came out on the Game Boy Color, like I said, in 2000, and it was developed by Bits Studios and published by Nintendo. So we get a big name publisher actually publishing for like this smaller company. And Bit Studios actually did Terminator 2 Judgment Day on the Game Boy, Genesis, and Super NES. So they did a lot of other really pretty well-known titles like R-Type, both 1 and 2 for the Game Boy. A lot of ports to handhelds. Right. So they also did the Amazing Spider-Man games on Game Boy. They did Spider-Man Return of the Sinister Six on the Game Gear. Oh, I had that. That game was pretty... I don't know if it was really that great now that I remember it, but I had it. And now you think about it. Yeah, they also did the NES port of that as well. And just a ton of Game Boy games. Like a lot of... They've done other stuff outside of handhelds, but I think they're best known... Bit Studios is best known on the handhelds. Well, and I love the sound from Game Boy and Game Boy Color and stuff like that. And how can you not? How can you not? Like everybody does. I mean, when I really started getting into game music, it blew my mind what this really early handheld could do as far as sound. And really coming from that demo scene, composers like Barry Leach and Jeroen Tel and stuff like that, like they could bring something to the table and really push the hardware in a different direction or in a different way than I think a lot of other composers could. And it made them stood out. Like it's so different than like Japanese composers. It's very, very different kind of style. And it's funny that it's like a regional split, right? Because Japanese composers have a very, very different sound that, we all love that sound, but European composers, American composers have a very different kind of take on chiptune music. And it's really interesting to see that. Why, I don't know why it's split like that, but it is. And it's just very cool on both sides of the spectrum. I think it's really awesome. Well, and I think having those two different types of sound is great when you see composers, U.S. composers that are influenced by Japanese composers and vice versa, where you see this really cool mixture of songs and sounds. And I mean, just Warlocked in general is just so great. I mean, the soundtrack, I liked it so much that it immediately made me want to pick up this game and play it. I may not like the game at all, but the music was so... it drew me in so much, like I wanted to find out more, which I love about it's amazing. Like there's probably like 8 or 9 tracks on this soundtrack that are just phenomenal. Very, very well done. And so about Warlocked, actually, because since you haven't played it, I actually played it when we were talking about it years ago, about this game. I was like, oh, I should check this out at least figure out what's going on. So Warlocked it's a real-time strategy game. It's a lot like I want to say like Age of Empires or like Warcraft 1 and 2, where you build up your towns or your civilizations, and then you get like stuff like barracks and castles and different different complexes that you build, and then you also have troops that go out and either fight, like kind of like offensive, and then you also have more of like gatherer types. So you have people who are like go and get lumber and stuff. It's been a while since I played, so I don't remember what they actually call them in the game. But it's really cool. You like control this big blue hand around. It's almost like you're playing as like God, but it's not really like, you're just like managing this kind of colony.
Right.
For the Game Boy, for the limited resolution and the limited assets that they could use on the Game Boy Color, it's very well done. And so when I was looking this up for, this expansion pack, I was like, I'd probably just see what other people thought of it. In fact, a lot of people were like, this game is like phenomenal. This is like a hidden gem kind of game. So it's really cool. The music's so good because, hey, it's a game you could probably want to pick up. Yeah. Anyways, what's next on your list, dude?
So for my final track for this episode, I'm going to be sticking with the TurboGrafx 16 PC Engine era and playing a track from Bomberman.
Excellent.
Called Background Music 5. That was Background Music 5 from Bomberman on the TurboGrafx 16.
That track is so cool because the first thing I noticed right away is you get a little bit of that Bomberman like classic theme in there, and then it deviates and then goes into like this other. There's like 5 Bomberman like theme tracks in there. It's almost like a mashup of like a medley of like I said, like 5 different Bomberman themes.
Yeah, there's so much going on in this track, and I really loved the really awesome beat, had great sounds. I really loved the really odd sounds that they mixed in there. It almost sounded like maybe like a game over type sound.
There's like that one drop, like it goes, and then like it starts up again. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, and it just really it puts me in a really good mood. Like, it gets my toes tapping and just really excited. And
how can you not be in a good mood with Bomberman? It's such a fun multiplayer game,
and it's another franchise that is just known for amazing music, really fun gameplay. Every time you play it on any system, it's just really fun, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. And like Bonk, this one is also developed and published by Hudson Soft, so you're just seeing that Hudson Soft is just doing some really awesome stuff,
and they were so great in the late 80s 90s. Like this Hudson Soft was like at the top of their game.
Great games, great music, good franchises. And
I had Bomberman for the original Bomberman for NES, and then I think my next Bomberman was actually Bomberman, maybe Super Bomberman or Bomberman 93 or 4 for the TurboGrafx. And I think out of all of them, the TurboGrafx Bomberman 94 was my favorite one because of the multiplayer aspect. It was so fun. And then when I finally got Saturn Bomberman, that is what like just my brain like exploded. Oh my god, I could play this with like 8 people. I had the multi-tap. I got that and everything. Like we would get together and we would, do whatever high school kids do and play
some Bomberman.
Play some Bomberman. And so it was. I have great memories of Bomberman and like hearing those themes kind of infused into like a track is just. That's way cool. Yeah. I like that.
Getting bombed with Bomberman.
Yeah.
I was, for me, my entry into Bomberman wasn't until Genesis. I played some Mega Bomberman.
Bomberman. Right.
One of my buddies, he lived right by the bus stop, so I would get there a little early. And my buddy Jason, that I went to elementary school and high school and stuff with, and we would, play some of that, pop on some Bomberman, play a couple rounds, or Zombies Ate My Neighbors, stuff like that. So we had a lot of fun with that. And the Dreamcast Bomberman, so good. I mean, just I can't think of a Bomberman that's not good.
I was pretty stoked when the Dreamcast version came out, because it was like Bomberman Online. You could play with people online. Now, I think it was a very short period that when that came out, that the Dreamcast, the online, was still, kind of relevant. And then I think shortly after that, like, I don't know, maybe within a year it was gone. But I remember, like, going with my 56K modem on the Dreamcast and playing with people online. It was really great. But it was always more fun playing with people side by side, because you could get pissed off at people and like, knock the controller out of their hand, or
it's a great multiplayer. And I anytime it comes out, it's a great game to pick up and have fun with. I mean, you can expect great music, awesome levels. I also want to bring up the composer, which is Jun Chikuma, and she is really awesome. I mean, she's done a lot of the Bomberman stuff. I mean, we said Bomberman is known for great music, and she's done a whole bunch of it. She's done like the Super NES Bomberman, as well as
she's done all of them, right?
Yeah, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Genesis, Super Famicom, Sega Saturn, PS1, stuff like that. Like,
I remember she did the soundtrack for Fasanadu, and I loved that game. And actually, Swendu, who was on one of our shows earlier, he's a big fan of that too. And he's like, "Oh, we got to do a Fasanadu episode."
Yeah, I mean, so we know it's going to have amazing music. She's just a really good composer,
right? So there's a lot of other stuff, right? Like she did Adventure Island.
Yes, the first Adventure Island, she did that. And it's just, the list goes on of just amazing stuff. So she's definitely going to be appearing quite a bit on the show.
Anyways, let's move over to my next track. In fact, this is our final track of the show, and this is a cool game that I never actually got a chance to play. I know about it. I remember seeing it in Nintendo Power, like different reviews and stuff, and hearing it was pretty good. My friends had it, but I just never got a chance to play it. And the game is called Disney's Darkwing Duck.
Nice.
Yeah, and the track we're going to play is called Wolfduck Stage. The game came out in 92 in North America and came out in 93 in Europe. And it's developed and published by Capcom. And Capcom was like the king of Disney licensed games. Like everything that they did was usually pretty amazing, like Chip and Dale, Aladdin. Like all those games were just really well done, very well thought out. And the development team just was doing a spectacular job bringing those cartoons and animations to life in some kind of interaction or interactive mode through video games.
Right. And for me, that was a huge section of games that I loved to play as a kid, was games that, I could also watch the characters on cartoons like DuckTales.
Oh, it was a big thing.
Quackshot, Taz, things like that. Like, it was just really cool stuff.
Did you watch the cartoon at all?
Oh, I loved Darkwing Duck. It was so cool.
I watched it a few times, but I wasn't into it like I was into like Chip and Dale and into DuckTales, obviously. And so I don't know the story. Like, I know bits and pieces. I think I watched it, I don't know, like during the summer, because that's when I was home. Most of the time I would, after school, when I was in elementary school, I would be going to like, after school programs and stuff like that. But I think during the summer is when I actually got to watch it. So I never watched like the full series. I got to watch like bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But I remember I liked it. I think that I always thought of it as like kind of a spin-off of DuckTales kind of thing. Right.
And I think a lot of that's how it was. But for me, it was just, I don't know, it was more of like a superhero version of DuckTales. So, I mean, obviously ducks were everywhere back in those days, but it just, to me, it drew me in a little bit more. It felt a little darker. It was still silly and fun, but it had that like superhero vigilante feel to me, which I was like, and I kind of want, like, who's Darkwing Duck? And, it was really fun stuff for me.
Right. It's a platformer based on the TV show. Obviously, the game is. And the story is, there's this crime wave masterminded by Steelbeak, who is like the main villain in the series, right? And so he hits the city and just causing all sorts of havoc and stuff. And Darkwing Duck has to stop him. So it's very similar to Mega Man. In fact, what I read when I just wanted to look it up because I knew nothing about it. I wanted to be able to say something. And I realized, like, okay, a lot of people are saying like this is based on the same engine that Mega Man 5 was based on. The game looks, when I was watching this playthrough, it looked like just like a Mega Man game.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very similar, like graphic layout, like everything for the design was very, very Mega Man style. So I thought, like, wow, I wish I wouldn't have missed this, because this looks like it could have been a pretty rad game. When you start off, there's, even in Mega Man, how you get to pick the level that you play. Mm-hmm. You get 3 different stages to choose from, and then after you beat those stages, you get 3 more to choose from. So it's kind of like go with the stages at your own pace.
Yeah.
But the game was composed by Yasuaki Fujita, and he was a composer at Capcom. He went under the aliases Boom Boom a lot of the time. For I don't know what that is a reference to. But anyways, he did a lot of stuff for Capcom. He did Mega Man 3. He worked on Final Fight 2, Breath of Fire, Puzzle Bobble for Neo Geo Pocket, and also did Metal Slug first and second mission for the Neo Geo Pocket Color.
Nice.
So a lot of cool stuff. Now, the interesting thing about this guy, and this is something that I didn't make the correlation with right away, is that he's actually married to another Capcom composer named Harumi Fujita. And you would know her from Bionic Commando, Strider, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, Gargoyle's Quest, which he did with Yoko Shimomura, and also Toomba for the PlayStation.
I love Toomba.
Yes, so it's really cool, like, to see, like, wow, oh, I didn't even know they were married.
Wow.
Holy. So very, very cool. So the track, again, is called Wolfduck Stage. Let's listen to that. Thanks again for listening to the show. You can visit us online at pixelatedaudio.com. We're also on Twitter at pixelatedaudio. And, thanks again for listening.